This is my new manuscript box. I bought it a couple of weeks ago with the intention of putting my entire manuscript for Stormcloud in here once I printed it. So the last time we spoke, I was telling you how I was editing the first 6 chapters of Project Stormcloud, looking at the beginning and just trying to step back and revision this story and how it's introduced. And at the time, I didn't think I had any like really serious edits to do. I was so naive then. And it's not even like naivete, whatever. Because I already knew, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment, but I already knew one of the major issues that I have as a writer myself personally, irregardless of the story, which keeps coming back to bite me in the butt, is that I always jump into the next round of a revision way too soon. And I know this, I knew it, I know this. But every time I trick myself into thinking, oh, it's only been a week, but this time it's different. I feel good about moving forward into the story. How can I feel good about moving forward when I still see the story in the exact same light as when I put the manuscript down a week before? You know, the whole point of taking a break from a story is to be able to look at it with brand new eyes. Looking at it with the same eyes really does me no good. It's kind of like an easier said than done thing, you know? In the moment, I kind of just do what I want to do, but in retrospect, you know, that whole hindsight is 20/20 thing. Oh, true words have not been spoken. A lot of the line edits that I was planning on doing, or that I had already done in the first 6 chapters of my story, are largely irrelevant now. Shocker, I know. Probably 3 major things have kind of given me this new sort of perspective on my story. One, time, obviously. It's been a couple of weeks, honestly, since I've even looked at that story. Kind of the most important ingredient in a revision is time. 2, and I talked about this in the last video, is having somebody else read my work. And of course, they can offer notes, point out things to you that you didn't notice before. And then 3, Black Panther. So Black Panther, everybody knows, all the rage. For a lot of different reasons, you know, power to my people, all that kind of stuff. But the reason Black Panther plays a role in this story, in my perspective of seeing my story, has nothing to do, actually, has nothing to do really with the movie so much as like one aspect of the world building. So in Wakanda, you know, they have the Dora Milaje, which is their version of like kind of a military. For some reason, seeing them in this movie really kind of struck a chord with me. Initially, I did think it was because, you know, it's a group of badass women defending their country and looking really good doing it, you know. But then I started to think about it. Okay, like it's that, but it's also, at least in relation to my writing, because whenever I watch a movie or a TV show, I'm always kind of like studying it. Like, what are some aspects I can try out in my story, or I can borrow, or, you know, kind of just inspires me to work on my own story. I was looking at this story with the Dora Milaje, like how can the Dora Milaje influence my writing? In Stormcloud, I have sort of a version of a military. I call them the Guard. Or the guards, you know, just kind of guards. They, you know, protect the world, but they weren't really fleshed out. They were kind of just, okay, here's a person who's protecting them. That was kind of the end of the story. Not really all that interesting. Didn't really have all that much depth to them. So I'm watching the Dora Milaje, and they play such an integral role in Wakanda that I'm thinking, okay, I need to make my guards have a more integral role in their society. And so basically I did a bit of world building, playing around with that. I came up with a new name for them. I had more of a kind of hierarchical status, so they were all just guards. They were all the same level, but there was nobody really in charge of them. So now I've got like generals who each oversee like one sector, I guess, and then you've got the commander who's in charge of them all. So like I added all these new characters, and it was kind of like all at once. I think I added like maybe 8 new characters to this, just based on the generals, at least named characters, because sometimes I like to name characters who won't actually appear in the story, just so I have an idea, just so it feels a bit more real, because if I just leave them unnamed, it feels like my world isn't completely built out in that area. I added so many new characters at once, not just with them, but like even with the legal system in my society, because I started thinking about the legal system in my society once I had kind of the military force. I do have like a court system in my society, but again, it wasn't very fleshed out. And I needed different people to be in charge of it than who I had written in the story as being in charge of it. And so I came up with even more new characters. I think it's like 6 new characters from that. So many new characters came out of this, and again, they're all very minor characters, but they won't even like play that much of a role in the plot so much as just the society. But still, with like a lot of new characters coming around at once, it made me see my story in a new way. That, and then the other thing that made me see my story in a new way was that I was trying to figure out how to implement all this new world building in my story, in the first 6 chapters of my story. Like how much of it can I implement so that it's realistic, so that it makes sense, and without it being obviously too much thrown at the reader at once. Because my character in the first 6 chapters, she does end up going to the court system because she does something to get in trouble, and so she's kind of receiving her punishment. So obviously that's going to have to change now. And now I have new characters who are going to be in that scene. I started to realize that in making all these little changes in world building, it would actually, in order to make it more realistic, I would have to change a lot more than just, you know, weaving in these new characters and this new world building. It would make characters who are currently in the first 6 chapters who do a specific thing in the chapter, it would be like, okay, that person wouldn't actually do that in this world, you know. Basically, in trying to make my world realistic, I have to move some of my characters around, and some of those character introductions are going to come later in the story than I originally intended. So it's been very interesting. At what point do you sacrifice realism for dramatism? And by dramatism, I just mean showing the world in an interesting way, even if it's not like a realistic way. At what point do you make your story so realistic that it's no longer interesting? You know, because you can follow all the rules in a society, but that's not necessarily very interesting. What's interesting is when you break the rules, or when things happen that the characters don't expect, you know, or when other characters make things happen that others don't expect, you know. So I'm just trying to play with that in the back of my subconscious, try to figure out, okay, how can I present my story in a way that's interesting dramatically, but also has enough realism that, you know, I'm not breaking my own rules later on, or that the reader is not going to be like, oh, but earlier you did this and now you're doing this, like what's going on with there. The difference between trying to write something that is realistic to your world that you've built and writing something that is dramatically interesting in terms of telling a story. That's what I'm playing with right now. Or rather, that was kind of the last thing I was playing with before I stepped back from the story to take a break. I'm not going to get into this too much. I think I'll talk about this more in a later video. But basically, in forcing myself to step back from Stormcloud, I am, of course, switching to my other story, which you've heard about a little bit, Project Pitchfork. Now, Project Stormcloud has been kind of the focus of these Them Writing Words videos, but right now we're going to switch a bit to Project Pitchfork, which I think is kind of exciting, while we leave Stormcloud on the back burner. I'm not sure how long it'll be until I get back to Stormcloud, only time will tell. It's so funny because I was actually planning on writing book 2 of Stormcloud for Camp NaNoWriMo in April, but that's like in 3 weeks and that's not going to happen. If you have any tips or tricks or just opinions on, you know, realism versus dramatism in storytelling, I'd like to know, because I'm really curious. I'm really trying to figure out what to do about this. So yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Give this video a like, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time. Toodaloo.